Welcome to Becoming America. I'm Bijan Kian, and I'm here with my colleagues and co-hosts, Dr. Joe Ellen Chatham and the Honorable Judge Jim Gray. This is the 15th in our series of conversations on the Constitutional Convention of 1787, the men who drafted the Constitution and the issues they faced. We are joined today by the Honorable Judge Andrew Guilford, and I will tell you more about him in a few minutes. But first, as we always do in these sessions, let's listen to one of the songs from the new musical Convention, The Birth of America. Judge Gray, Steve Lawless, and Joel Henry Stein wrote Convention to provide a lively, entertaining, and historical look at the Constitutional Convention. And we open all our conversations with one of his songs. Today, we're going to listen to We the People. Judge Gray, those words are so familiar to us. Tell us about the song and what we should listen for.
Well, Bijan, it's the end now of the convention, and the Constitution has been generally approved. But now we have a group. It's called the Committee on Style and Arrangement. And there were six members of it: Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, Rufus King, William Johnson, and Gouverneur Morris. I guess there were five. And so instead of just saying, well, all right, folks, here it is, sort of thing, they decided that they really wanted to have something that was lasting. And so I can tell you, let me go back to the script of Convention to introduce the song just a little bit, where we have Alexander Hamilton saying, "My friends, it looks like we have a constitution at last. This really is historic because we will be the first country in the world to define itself not by blood, religion, or land, but by a law, the Constitution. But we can't just jump into the details. This document should not only lead us, but it should lead the world into self-government. So this is truly momentous. We need a lead-in. We can't just say, James Madison wrote and your delegates hereby ratify and bring forth for your consideration a constitution. So here it is." No. And James Madison, no. This was not the fabled goddess of wisdom, the offspring of a single brain. It ought to be regarded as the work of many heads and many hands. Rufus King, Madison's right yet again. This should be different. And besides, it's not just from him or even us. It comes from everybody. Hamilton, our friend Rufus King shows his wisdom. This Constitution is not bestowed upon a country by a king or even by us delegates. This authority is not even established from above. It comes from the below. It comes from our core. Leadership is delegated by the voters to those who can make decisions for us, but it is truly delegated by Gouverneur Morris. We the people. Now, Gouverneur Morris really came up with all of the lines here. I'd love to say that I wrote the lyrics to this, but I don't think I could get away with it. But now let's listen to it. And by the way, I've lived my entire life without having memorized the preamble to the Constitution of the United States of America. But now that I have this song, it's really pretty easy. I think we're going to have many people forevermore, young and old, now knowing the preamble to the Constitution and the power that it brings us. Let's listen to it, Bijan.
We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish States of America. We the people, we the people of America.
Judge Gray, those are powerful words, and especially the first three words, we, the people. They talk about us. Today, to talk to us about we, the people, and the preamble meaning is the Honorable Judge Andrew Guilford, recently retired after serving for nearly 14 years as a United States Federal District Court judge. Judge Guilford is one of only two central district judges in his region to have been invited to sit on the Federal Circuit Court of Appeals, as well as sitting on the Ninth Circuit. He has heard more than 100 trials as a federal judge. Before that, served as an arbitrator and judge pro tem for the Superior Court in Orange County, California. He's a trial lawyer for more than 31 years and elected to American College of Trial Lawyers. He has been a president of State Bar of State of California, countless hours of lecturing and writing for law schools, religious entities, legal publications, bar associations, judicial organizations, and much more, both nationally and internationally. Judge Guilford says he's retired, but he keeps very busy as a mediator, arbitrator, private judge, case evaluator, and much more. Judge Guilford, welcome to Becoming America. It is a privilege to welcome you. Now, when we asked you to join our conversation to discuss we the people and the meaning of the preamble, we had no idea that this conversation would take place in the year 2021, just a few days after a series of events, after a contentious national election, which reflects a bitterly divided nation, and the decision for a president to refuse to attend the inauguration of his successor. Before that, riots raged for months in many of our major cities. We're not going to discuss these events because they're far from the focus of the subject, which is the Convention of 1787. But the subjects that we are going to discuss are very much related to our times here in the year 2021 and right after the elections. But first, can you tell us, Judge Guilford, what is the purpose of the preamble? Does it have a legal authority?
Well, great question. Speaking of preambles, let me give just a little preamble and say I'm really honored to be here with you folks. And perhaps there's no more important time in our history to be talking about us as a unified group in the United States of America. And one other thing, when I was judge, people sometimes ask who was my boss. I was speaking in China on the rule of law. And I remember hearing murmurs in the crowd when I said my boss was not President Trump. My boss was the United States Constitution. And I could hear them rumble. And I thought for a moment that was a hopeful thing. Oh, Judge Gray, it's probably the same one. Cato, whatever. I keep it in my pocket, and the Constitution is the solution to everything that's facing us. So that's my brief preamble. But now to the real preamble, the preamble to the Constitution. It's interesting to note that back then in that time, preambles were very important. Lots of legal documents had preambles. Some of the dispute on the Second Amendment concerns the little preamble in the Second Amendment. It was a universal thing to be using a preamble. And of course, here the preamble is to explain the purpose of the Constitution, to explain the goals of a united government that was being formed, and to note that this all came from the people. And here, underline what you just said, I think the most important words then, and maybe even more so now, are the words, we the people. the unification that that implies, the community that that implies. And to answer your specific question, of course, it's not the law. The law comes in the words following in the Constitution. It's not the law, but very importantly, it's been used by the Supreme Court and lots of other courts in trying to understand the purpose and the goal of the Constitution.
Interestingly enough, in 1787, when the convention was meeting, on August 6th, the Committee of Detail put out a report which summarized all of the decisions they had made so far. And they had a preamble. And the preamble started this way: "We, the people of the states of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and so on." But a month later, when the Committee of Style, which Judge Gray referred to a minute ago, Gouverneur Morris, who basically did most of the work of that committee in terms of doing the writing, actually changed the preamble to say this: "We, the people of the United States." There was really no debate in the convention. They just accepted it and moved on. But during the ratification debates throughout the 13 states, this became a big issue. They complained, "Why did you say we the people?" So Judge Guilford, why was this change important? And secondly, why was it so controversial during the ratification process?
Well, great question, because it goes to some important historical truths about our origins. You know, we had the Articles of Confederation and they weren't working, and they joined in to the Constitutional Convention to either amend or change. And the decision ultimately became that we will change and we will have a constitution and we will have a new government. And the issue there is reflected in whether it is the United States as one nation or a loose confederation of many states. And obviously you can see in the two preambles the view of loose confederation, kind of along the lines of the Articles of Confederation, or one nation, one people. And here, moving forward a bit to the Civil War, there was an interesting point in the big PBS series on the Civil War that before the Civil War, people used to say, the United States are whatever. After the Civil War, people began to say the United States is. And the implication of that has so much importance across the spectrum of ideas. For example, you know, e pluribus unum, out of many, one. If we're really out of many, one, and God help us, now is a time for us to be out of many, one. The reference not to all the states coming together, but the reference to the people as one. So that also goes into answering your second question, why the opposition? Well, at this time, there were anti-federalists, even great patriots like Patrick Henry, who resisted the conglomeration of power into one federal government. Patrick Henry said, in criticizing the opening lines of the Constitution, who authorized them to speak the language of we the people instead of we the states? States are the characteristics and soul of a confederation. So the opposition came from the anti-federalists. And here, I don't want to get too deep into history or too wonky, but it's important to understand that word federalism because it gets so confused. Today, when we say federalism, we mean power goes to the states. Power goes to the states. That's federalism for we judges. But the anti-federalists were in favor of the states. So there's a little bit of confusion what federalism means. It either means the strong central federal government, but as language has evolved, it means power to the states. And I've often wondered why that is. I think it's because when we were forming the federal government, we wrote documents, the Federalist Papers. And those Federalist Papers tried to convince people to have a federal government. And the way they did that was to say the states would still be empowered. And I think in that process, federalism now refers more to the power of the states than to forming a strong central government. Important point, because we hear that word a lot.
Well, the Constitution does give enumerated powers to the national government, and the rest of the powers are presumably left to the people and to the states. And so obviously this was a huge matter of contention, the role of the federal government, how much power it had versus the states.
Judge Guilford, I claim one of my strong points is that you are one of my best friends, and I think we should set that forth right now. You actually tried a fairly large, substantial lawsuit in my court before we became friends, but I will say publicly, I would trust you to make decisions on important things in my life or others. So Andy, welcome. Also, I believe that the United States is an exceptional country, and I'll ask you this question as well. I believe it's inherently different from other nations. What to you is the term American exceptionalism? Do you believe that America is exceptional and that we, the people, really make a difference? And as you know, we call this show Becoming America. America is a perfect idea. The United States of America is a work in progress. I think that discusses exceptionalism as well, realistically. What are your thoughts on that subject, sir?
Throughout my life, I've been an American exceptionalist. And actually, gosh, I could use this whole hour here talking about American exceptionalism. I think it's important on issues like we the people. Why do we self-identify as a people? Well, I think the best way to do that is to say that we, the people in this group, are special. We are uniquely special. Now, we have to be careful when that has a negative side, and it can have a negative side in jingoism. The challenge is to take the notion of American exceptionalism and use it in a positive way. In a far trivial manner, when I was bar president, someone came up to me once and said, every time you give a speech, you say how important the state bar is, then you identify a problem, then you say we as important people can solve that problem. I didn't realize I did that. But similarly, I like an American president who says we are uniquely special. We've got problems, and in our special role, we can solve that problems. I think some of our difficulties of late have been because we have stopped believing we are a special people. And we've redefined, well, the French think they're special, the Italian thinks they're special, and we think we're special. No, there's a difference. I'd say that throughout our history, great people like John Winthrop, John Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, and even turned to the other party, Mario Cuomo, have referred to us as a shining city on the hill. And when they say that, it's a unique thing. It's a beacon of freedom. You know, folks like de Tocqueville and Winston Churchill have extolled American virtues. And, you know, I bought into it. Honestly, I have to say, since the Obama years and moving through the Trump years, I've had my doubts. I have had my doubts about whether we are this uniquely special community of people that I have described. But I still cling to it. And it's so important that I actually have written down the words that I think make us special. And forgive me for reading these words, but I want to make sure I don't miss anything. And occasionally I add to this, and maybe sadly I have to subtract from this. But I think America, compared to all the other countries, is special because of our risk-taking immigrants. For one thing, we are a nation of people who took the risk to come over here. I'm looking at you smiling there, to be an entrepreneur. I mean, think of the risk. I live 60 miles from where I was born, not much risk there. We are a group of immigrants who are entrepreneurs. We had a fresh beginning out of the Enlightenment. I think there's some very positive things about the Enlightenment and the rights of people. And think of it, our nation grew right out of those views, unlike other nations. Perhaps most importantly, I think our founding documents make us exceptional. They were precocious at the time, and they are still precocious and lead the way. I think of Ho Chi Minh holding up the Declaration of Independence. Our founding documents were special then, and I think they remain special if we understand them, which programs like this help us to do. I think our egalitarianism makes us special. I think our geographic advantages make us special. I think our originally strong and our continuing commitment to ethical monotheism makes us special. I think other countries don't have it quite like we have it. I think growing out of our reaction to King George III and such, I think we have a unique commitment to freedom and liberty. And I think that contributes to our market freedoms that embrace risk and entrepreneurialism and the allocative efficiencies of the pricing system. So that's my list. Tell me if I should add, argue if I should subtract. But when I think about that, I don't think any other country can claim it like we can. And I think if we live up to those ideals, we can do better, just like giving a speech. We're great, we have problems, but in our greatness, we will do better. So I feel strongly about that. On our founding documents, I just have to say that I believe our Constitution is the greatest non-religious achievement of humans in the last 1,000 years, maybe 2,000 years. So you may be thinking Apollo 11, digital technology, the printing press, and I'll argue with you on all of those. I believe the Constitution is the greatest achievement.
Let me just ask Andy to commit publicly to us to write down an article, what he just said with regard to why we are exceptional, and submit it to the Los Angeles Daily Journal or some such periodical. Will you commit to do that, please, for us all?
Sure. I thought you were going to say the LA Times, and that would be an easy one. They wouldn't publish it. The Daily Journal might.
So, Judge Guilford, if we were in the court, Your Honor, I believe I would be possibly presented as evidence to what you just said.
That's what I looked at you and I said, immigrant entrepreneurs.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I see myself as that. I see myself as that. And thank you so much for that very elegant reasoning. And I thank my dear brother and colleague, Judge Gray, for asking you to commit to writing an article. I think our viewers, who knows, maybe 100 years from now, would read these words and listen to them and would know why United States of America is exceptional. And thank you for that. But, you know, I want to go back to those 3 words of the preamble to the Constitution. And those 3 words, we the people. In 1787, who were we the people? Women, Native Americans, slaves, they were there. Were they included in that, in the spirit of the men who wrote these words? Did they feel like they could truly say we the people without the women, Native Americans, the slaves? Please tell us about what do you believe was on their minds when they said we the people?
What a great question. And it's a question we must always remember. I did note the possible harm that can come from excessive exceptionalism, jingoism, overlooking our faults. I still love America the Beautiful. God, mend thine every flaw. Yeah, thank you. I'm getting different pictures here. Yes, we need to do better. And that goes to your question, because you are identifying some problems that existed back then and to some extent, I think, still exist. To answer your question, yes, the Constitution applies to all of us. I would begin by saying that the protections of the Constitution were interpreted to apply to all aspects at times of our population. It is true that at the beginning, some of our rights were not applied to everyone, but all of our people got some rights. And in that sense, I would say it does apply to we the people. I would also say, as we move forward, mending our every flaw, of course, we have mended those flaws. Women can vote. Thank God, Dr. Cheatham. How could it be that we would not allow half of our population, half of our IQ in the minds of our people to give us their wisdom? So we are protecting those kinds of things. I would also say that on the issue of slavery, which has always troubled me, still troubles me, and still troubles the nation, many of the founders of the Constitution wanted to abolish slavery. They clung to e pluribus unum and knew that if we were to be one, at least at that moment, we were not prepared to abolish slavery, but they were committed to do so. And in a few decades, too many decades, they succeeded in doing so. And in a bloody war, we abolished slavery. But going back to your question, I think I've used too many words for a simple question. Yes, the goal is we the people, all of us, I might even say non-citizens have rights under the Constitution. And from the beginning, everyone had some of those rights. Not all of them had all of those rights. Women couldn't vote. Slaves didn't have freedom. But the goal has always been that all of us have those rights. I hope that answers the question somewhat awkwardly.
That does answer the question, Judge Guilford, and that's precisely why, as we believe America is a perfect idea, the United States is work in progress, constantly improving. Thank you for that answer, Judge Guilford.
And when you say God mend our every flaws, we pray that he will do that. In the process, we're also doing it, as you said, because we've amended the Constitution 27 times to make it even better. And the first of those were the Bill of Rights, which made sure that we did have the freedoms. And then the Civil War amendments made sure that the former slaves had those rights extended to them as well. But one of the problems, I think, is when we look back at history and we see what today we consider flaws, excluding Indians, women, and slaves, and so on, we cannot impose our more enlightened values today on judging the people of the past. To some degree we can, but just as you said, there were slave owners, but there were also many thousands of people, and through time, millions of people who opposed slavery. While there were people who opposed giving women the right to vote, well, guess what? It was white men who gave women the right to vote. So history is more complicated than just simply imposing our beliefs today on the past, including our founders. But that brings up the question of generation. How do we, and I agree with you, Judge, that we are an exceptional nation, not perfect, but certainly exceptional. And this is why people all around the world leave their homeland to come here. But how do we impart these values, the understanding of our Constitution and first principles, to the next generation? Today, 30% of college students believe the First Amendment goes too far and that we should ban offensive speech on the campus, for example. How do we share these values with the next generation? I think immigrants like Bijan, and I have many immigrant friends who understand this country better than many of our own people do, and they appreciate it more.
Very good question. Very timely, especially for now. Let me begin by saying we can have programs like this and encourage people to watch it and encourage people to learn about our Constitution. We need to never be ashamed to talk about those glorious parts of our past, our present, and our future. Yes, a clear answer is in education. I worry about our schools up through and beyond college. We aren't teaching these. Now, you know, I was born in 1950 and I was taught these things. And I think it is very important for us to be taught these things. I think we need to celebrate the 4th of July and know why we're celebrating the 4th of July. And may I say, as an old man, Judge Gray, we should celebrate February 12th and February 22nd like we used to. How many kids know when Lincoln's birthday was? And every time we celebrate things, we should understand why we're celebrating things. Holidays should have a meaning. The 4th of July has a meaning. February 12th had a meaning. The meaning was Abraham Lincoln was a great leader who did great things, freed the slaves. Now, to some extent, that story has been assumed into Dr. King's birthday, which I completely endorse as an example of us mending our every flaw, as an example of a great man, a man of God who led us. So we should have February 12th. Some of that message also now comes with Dr. Martin Luther King's holiday. On the 22nd, we should be celebrating George Washington, not the presidents. How can you amorphously celebrate the presidents? And frankly, there's a few presidents I probably don't think deserve celebrating. Old guys, not the recent ones, of course. But we need to celebrate Washington's birthday. I consider Washington to be the greatest man of the millennium. I have a list. He is the greatest man of the millennium. And we should celebrate that. And we should ask ourselves, why is he a great person? And ask ourselves about the nation he helped found and where did his greatness come in that? I think it's because he stepped away from power. And in stepping away from power, he allowed the government to be a government of we the people, not a government of King George Washington. So education is important. Speaking out is important. Celebrating holidays is important. When you see things that aren't true, and I'll say it, I don't think the 1619 Project is true. Speak out against it. Be prepared to speak out against it. Be informed. People read things that just aren't true and they believe it because courageous people, informed people aren't prepared to say, no, this nation wasn't founded to preserve slavery in 1619. We need to be informed and say things like that. And I also think we need to self-identify as a community, as Americans. There was a great speech given by President Barack Obama before he became president that we are the United States, not red states, blue states, but the United States. And that's an ideal we should be living up to. And then to live up to it, we need to understand what's important about us, what's special about us. You know, if you're in a group and it's not special, you're not particularly interested in identifying with it. When you are in a group that is special, like the UCLA Bruins, Judge Gray, sorry, doctor, I'm joking on that, and I shouldn't trivialize this important point. Know that we're special and therefore celebrate that specialness, know that specialness, and defend that specialness.
You know,
Judge Guilford, if a millennial was with us today and listening to the need to understand the civic virtue that we all need to have as citizens to call ourselves we the people, they would say we have too much freedom. We have too much freedom and we have to restrict this freedom. We have to be culturally adjusting our freedoms. And I've heard these things from our millennials even recently. What would you say to them when they say, oh, I'm suffering from something and you're telling me there are reasons for me not to suffer and I just have to agree that liberty cannot be sacrificed for anything? What would you say to them, the people who are complaining we have too much freedom?
Well, a couple of things. You know, Judge Gray, when he was running for higher office and should have been elected, often says that with freedom comes responsibility, and they conflict with each other to some extent, but they are a necessary part of each other. You can't have freedom without responsibility, and there's a couple of ways of looking at that. One is, you know, civic virtues. Civic virtues, I think, basically are what good citizens should do. And there are some obvious things about that. You know, they should serve on a jury. They should pay their taxes. They should do those things that good citizens do. But they should also have a larger commitment. And, you know, here, I have to say, freedom versus responsibility. I had the privilege, one of the great privileges of being a judge, of swearing in new citizens. And so just if you could give me just a moment on that. You know, we're a little blasé. I was born in America. I've been in America. Okay, America. Boy, when you see those new citizens, bright, shiny faces, waving their flags, excited, it makes me say to myself, gosh, I guess I should be excited like them. It really is something. And by the way, before they become citizens, they have to do all this learning we've talked about. They probably know more about the Constitution than most Americans know more about the Constitution. And they are excited to be Americans. And in their oath, they're required to say things that reflect their responsibility. Maybe I won't read all of the oath, but it's fascinating to see those people, some of them struggling with English, say, I hereby declare on oath that I absolutely and entirely renounce and abjure all allegiance and fidelity to any foreign prince, potentate, state, or sovereignty. That's one thing they say. Then they say, I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I will bear arms on behalf of the United States when required by law, that I will perform work of national importance under civilian direction when required by law, that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Most federal oaths include that. We should always remember it, that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. And then they say that I take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion. So help me God. I have administered that oath to probably tens of thousands of people. And you know, if you haven't seen those ceremonies, you might drop into those ceremonies and be inspired to be an American. And one thing I say in my brief speech is, congratulations, welcome to the family of Americans. And I tell them they are now part of my family and I am part of their family. We the people together.
Judge Guilford, may I say on behalf of my two fellow hosts, that Bijan is called I am called the judge here, just slang term. Dr. Joe is called the professor, but Bijan is called the American. And I'm here to tell you, he has done all of those things that you just mentioned in that oath. And I'm proud of him as an American, as I'm proud of us all. Let me inject a little levity. I'm going to ask you two questions here. One was when you were giving a talk to the bar, I think it was, and you said that somebody was happy as a clam. I raised my hand. You made the mistake of calling on me, and I said, Judge Guilford, what do you think makes a clam happy? And that was my attempt at levity there. You didn't really satisfactorily answer that question, but I know you will this one, and that is that you were the one who first told me that of the three branches of government, the third branch, so-called third branch, the judiciary, is probably the most important because that's the one that does not cater to the majority. The presidents, the governors, they all are elected by the majority, so they always have their eye out for what the majority thinks. Same thing with the legislature, with Congress. It's the court system that stands up to uphold minority rights, and that makes us what we are. Please elaborate on that because, and you can skip the clam part, but talk about the judiciary.
I have bias here. Behind me is the building I have worked in as a great honor for many years. I hope a lot of justice was done in that building. The judiciary really is important, Jim. And it goes back to my statement that the Constitution is the most important document developed by humans in the last 1,000 years. The reason it is that is because it balances power. A curse of humanity since the beginning is the powerful abusing the less powerful. And the Constitution balances that in a way that had never been done before back in 1789. And too infrequently is not done now. And the way it balances, by the way, when we say balance, we usually talk about balance between the different branches. It's also balance between the people and the governed. And the government, the governed and the government. And that's in the Bill of Rights. Bill of Rights says, government, you can't do that to the people. So there's that balance. And then there's the balance between the branches. And I like to say to new lawyers, when I swear them in and make them promise to support and defend the Constitution, I like to say, which branch determines power between the branches? The judicial branch is the one that ultimately determines what each branch's power will be. And if the judicial branch is the branch that determines that power, that protects minorities from the abuses of power, that tries to protect us from Lord Acton's view that power tends to corrupt and absolute power corrupts absolutely, it's the courts that limit the power. And that's why I was proud to be a judge, and I'm proud to be a lawyer.
If the judges are the guardians of the Constitution, why are our judicial nominations to the Supreme Court so divisive?
Oh my gosh, we need more programs. That's another hour. That, I believe that is the problem of the courts being politicized. And I have to say, I had the unique honor of having dinner with the Archbishop of Canterbury from England, and a brilliant man. And when he found out I was a judge, he said, and by the way, he's a very progressive man. And he said, why did you politicize your court so much? It has turned the Supreme Court into a mockery. Why has it been politicized? Now, Professor, we can debate why. We can go back to the Bork hearing and getting borked. We can go back to Ronald Reagan. I mean, we can place blame on both sides. Ronald Reagan said he would appoint a pro-life candidate, so that meant that we have to fight it on that battlefield. It has been around too long. I wish it would go away. But as the Archbishop of Canterbury said, gosh, you Americans have really politicized your court. We don't do that in the United Kingdom. And it made me step out and look at our country from across the ocean and maybe see obvious truths to others that hadn't appeared to me. To answer your question, we have politicized it. It has become a vehicle for making law rather than interpreting law. And if we were true to our ideals that the Supreme Court is there to interpret law, interpret the word of the law, rather than to expand the law, I think we would become less political. The simple answer to your question is, I think it comes down to whether the court is interpreting the law or making the law. But that itself is a politically controversial statement.
You mentioned the Archbishop of Canterbury, but going back to your list of important virtues or values of American exceptionalism, you mentioned reverence to a monotheistic God. What's the role of religion in our constitutional system? Important, but necessarily limited.
And you know, actually, as I say, this never occurred to me, but when I say important but necessarily limited, that's exactly what the First Amendment says in its two clauses. One elevates and one protects us. And the role of religion, I think, tends to be important because it gives us ethical monotheism, and that's not just Christianity and Judaism. It's many different religions, and I think from that ethical monotheism, we are able to define one truth. The American here I'm looking at made some reference to relativism, I think, in earlier conversations we've had. Ethical monotheism is a strong way of establishing the reality of one truth, not the relativism of different truths. And if there is one truth, like the dignity of humans, then you can start writing documents about the dignity of humans. If there is one truth, like the wisdom of speaking freely, then you can write a First Amendment on that. If all of that is relative, and it's getting more relative, it's hard to stand up strongly for these principles that I think made us great. So that, in a nutshell, is my answer to that. Religion is important. It gives us ethical monotheism. And I'm not saying that non-religious people cannot also identify truths, but I don't think they can do it as strongly. We also have to remember the other side of that First Amendment, though, that limits the participation of government in religion. And I do think there have to be limitations on government in religion. I think that if we follow our principles in the Constitution, our laws will ultimately be right and good. But I also think there are religious laws that should never make their way into our civic laws. As a simple example, cursing. I believe some religious people don't believe in cursing. I do not believe there should be a law that says you go to jail if you curse. And one of the challenges, I think, is defining which laws, which values do we have that should be made civil laws, like murder, we can make that illegal, and which laws maybe not. I said cursing, that clearly shouldn't be made a law. I could throw out things like adultery and other things, and perhaps they should be religious laws, but not civil laws.
Let me add, we're kind of running out of time, and I have an important question that I'd like to ask you, but I would like to also highlight what you just said with regard to religion, because the Constitution protects government from the influence of religion and also protects religion from the influence of government. Critically important. But
you said it much better than I. That's what I was trying to say.
Well, Andy, I've been deeply disturbed. I had a podcast for a while, as you know, called All Rise, the Libertarian Way with Judge Jim Gray. And I interviewed a man who is the director of the Innocence Project in San Diego, named Scott, I can't remember his name at the moment, but he told me, you mentioned that it protects the strong from the weak and then the weak from the strong. He mentioned that he himself has been doing this for 20 years, and he himself has walked 29 people out of state prison who are found to be factually innocent. The prosecution has an enormous power, and I say, as strongly as I can, they have an absolute obligation to do the right thing for the right reason every time. You, as a judge, would look at habeas corpus petitions, 1938 rights of prisoners, and I know you took that seriously. Do all judges take that seriously? If I were to file a habeas corpus petition to every federal judge, how many do you feel would take it as seriously as you do? Because I admire you for it, and I'm concerned about that issue.
Good judges take it seriously, and there are a lot of good judges.
Since we are about out of time, Bijan, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask the last question.
Please.
Judge, you referred earlier to we should celebrate our holidays by remembering what the holiday is for. And you specified July 4th. I would encourage everyone watching this and every American to read a speech by Frederick Douglass, who was an escaped slave and became a leader in the abolitionist movement. And even before the Civil War, I think it was around 1854, 1856, he was asked to give a speech on what the Declaration of Independence meant to the Negro. And it's a long speech, but it is well worth reading, because unlike so many people today who want to cancel our history, who want to trash the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, Frederick Douglass gave an incredible speech where he extolled the virtues of the Declaration and the men who wrote it, even though some of them, including George Washington, were slave owners. And instead of trashing them, he extolled them. And then he said, what does the Negro want? We want that. In other words, he saw the value of liberty and what we stand for. And all he wanted was to have, and it's a huge request, but it was the right one. He wanted that extended to him and to his people and to other slaves. It's a brilliant speech, and people should read it. So Andy, your thoughts, your closing thoughts, what is it like to be, what do you think it is like to be an American? How should we defend these values?
I think ultimately by understanding the values and understanding why America gives us those values. The American here that I'm looking at talked about civic virtues and all. There's one other I should mention, and that is the Constitution is based on limited government. That's important. The bigger the government, the smaller the person. The smaller the government, the bigger the person. But if we believe in limited government, we also have the obligation of volunteerism. And that was a popular part of any speeches I gave. Volunteerism. If you think government should be small, then the individual has to step up and help his fellow person. These, to answer your question, Professor, these are all parts of what make us a community that is worthy of the affection I have and we all should have for it.
May I close by providing two quotes. One is from Thomas Jefferson that equates, Andy, to what you were just saying. Most bad government comes from too much government, and I subscribe to that. The other is from George Washington, who I also agree is the man of the millennium. And he said, quote, "Government is not reason, it is not eloquence, it is force. Like fire, it is a dangerous servant and a fearful master. Never for a moment should it be left to irresponsible action." It's up to us. As I say, it's we the people, it's our government, and if it's not working, it's our responsibility. Andy, I say publicly, thank you for carrying out that responsibility. American professor, I say the same to you. I'm proud to be associated with you all. Thanks for joining us.
Judge Guilford, they say all good things must come to an end, but years from now, a student perhaps sitting in high school watching this program would not like me and say, this guy, bald-headed guy, they call him the American, he ended this program too early. I wanted to hear Judge Guilford more. And I do take that risk, but you've been a wonderful, wonderful lecturer, educator, and we've all learned from what your wisdom and knowledge today shared with us. We are very grateful to you, Judge Guilford, for joining us and for the education. And we hope to have the opportunity to have you again to talk about more of your thoughts and your interpretation of the Constitution as we talk about we the people. Now, if you want to, for our viewers, if you want to listen again to the song We the People or any of the other songs from convention, just go to judgejimgray.com and you can listen to any of them. And if you're interested in reading a day-by-day history of the Constitutional Convention, log on to Concordia University Irvine Center for Public Policy, and then read each day in the blogs. It only takes about a few minutes to read them. We look forward to seeing you next time when we take a musical tour of American history and find out why Benjamin Franklin told his colleagues, the sun is rising. Thank you and have a great day until we meet again.